For the next session, we've entitled it Elite Runners, What Do They Offer and How Does a Race Benefit? So far, we've been talking about distance runners, really. But what we are, we're not runners, or we may be, but we're here as race organisers. And we need to start talking a little bit about races themselves. There is a slight difference, I feel. Luis gave a very impactful presentation today, full of a lot of detail. We would like to pick up some of the questions he rose in that presentation. But to start off, we hope to make this what is called an interactive session. We want people talking to each other, considering a problem, going away, talking about it, coming back with their views and opinions and maybe even conclusions, but those aren't necessary. It's just, as our articles say, it's an exchange of experience and opinions. To start off proceedings, I would like to invite Arpad Kočiš and Alan Brooks to give their views. Alan had a video running just earlier showing elite athletes arriving at the race and finishing the race. That's quite, that's a simple process. It looks like there are all kinds of complications involved in catering for an elite field. There are many different kinds of races in the world, some of which an elite field is important, to others it's not. So we would like to explore first some of the reasons why an elite field may be beneficial or interesting for a race, for the media, for different constituencies like that, and some reasons why it may be of limited interest and race organisers may not wish to invest in an elite field. There's a certain amount of money, there's quite a lot of money that needs to be committed to that, and attention to detail. So we would like to represent the full range of races and opinions and circumstances that AIMS member races find themselves in. We've picked, mainly because I'm familiar with these races and I sort of know the people, some of the views that these people hold. I would like to start the exchange with Alan Brooks, make a short presentation, and then Arpad Kočiš will pick up from that and make his own observations. From there, we'll take it, but I think Luis is still here. We'd like to draw him into the discussion as we go on, and at some point, when the session starts to get out of hand, we'll break, go into smaller groups, and continue the discussion, and then we'll report back tomorrow. That's the format. So without anything further to do from me, I'd like to ask Alan Brooks to make his initial presentation. Thanks, Alan.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a special honor and a privilege, I think, to be here. And I think many of us were stimulated and inspired by the speakers this morning that Hugh referred to. When I give talks sometimes around Toronto, I love to quote Mr. Mandela, that sport has the power to change the world, and it brings us together like nothing else can. And I'd particularly like to extend a thank you to Cheryl and Gary and the Comrades Committee and Group, the AIMS Committee, for bringing us all together here on what is already a memorable weekend. This session is supposed to be interactive, as our General Secretary, Mr. Jones, mentioned. So a quick show of interactive hands, don't be shy. Who of you out there are race organizers who have invited athletes? A forest of hands, that's good. Mr. Milder has his hand up. I'm blinded by the light, but you'll have to take note. Take names there, Mr. Jones. And a show of hands now, those of you who do not have invited athletes at your races. Hands high. Well, very shy people out there. We'll have to get them loosened up, Gary. We won't ask you at this point to go on opposite sides of the aisle, but Hugh has suggested that could happen in a short while. Elite runners, what do they offer? How does the race benefit? Or a subtitle, perhaps, are high-performance athletes relevant for our marathons today? or are they a total waste of time and money? When we met in Athens, President of the IAAF, Lamine Diak, mentioned that the glory of our sport today lies in the marathon. That's the good news. I think particularly, though, the glory lies in city marathons that have become all the rage, from Berlin to Boston, Tokyo to Toronto. Tokyo with 1/3 applicants every year for 30,000 places. And I would suggest this afternoon that city marathons provide great stages for our events, for our cities, and for our sport. For best effect, we want everyone on these stages to have our mass happenings to make the biggest impact. The big tent, then, I think, beckons all runners to these city marathons. 3 types of marathon runners: the healthy lifestyle folks, and we heard a lot of that this morning from the head of the Department of Sport and Recreation. So the recreational, healthy lifestyle folks, the charity runners in the costumes that we see at London and so many marathons are on the stage. And finally, a group that Senor Pozo made such an impassioned appeal for this morning, the competitive, high-performance runners, or the pro athletes, all surely belong on the big stage of city marathons. That's us. Mary Wittenberg, a couple of years ago, gave a nice address to a Running USA conference. If it wasn't for pro athletes, running would be just like yoga. A great, healthy pastime, but not the sport we know and love. And a week or so ago, this lovely poster I came across on Twitter for the Great Manchester Run, the greatest distance runners on earth. Earlier this morning, another fellow Twitter addict, at Alana Meyer there, had Alana versus Zola. Just like we see in other sports, in boxing or tennis, the thrill of competition, of head-to-head competition. So running, still a sport about competition, not yet yoga. Yoga not in the Olympics yet, nice as it is. Perhaps then, in the PR campaign, we need to broaden our definition a little from just elite athletes, which has such a derogatory sort of handle to it, to competitive and high-performance runners. And then we have those competitive high-performance runners, the healthy lifestyle, the charity folks. We need all of them, and for a successful marathon, at least our gang in Toronto believe, we need a balance. What then do the pro athletes, the competitive athletes do? Well, like Kipsang versus Bekele, Alana versus Zola, they build buzz, excitement, the thrill of the race for our events, for the mass of the runners and for the spectators, so for participants and spectators. For city marathons, too, pro athletes bring media. And we're very lucky in Toronto that we're the media capital of our country, as is New York City, as is London, as is Tokyo. And so the media only have to walk down the street to be at our event. Sponsors, as well as the event itself getting the buzz and the excitement, benefit from this media coverage. We're lucky enough to have had our bank, Scotiabank, for 18 years as a sponsor. And every year they ask 3 things. How many runners did we have, Alan? How much money did we raise well, the first answer is about 25,000 last year. How much money did we raise for charity, Alan? Well, it was about $4 million last year. And what was the value of our media impressions, Alan? And for a relatively modest sponsorship investment, they got $12.7 million worth of unpaid media exposure at the Scotiabank Toronto Waterfront Marathon last autumn. Most of this came from our winner there you saw in the video, if you were in to watch it, Derisa Chimsa from Ethiopia, running a new Canadian all-comers mark of 2:7:05. And the lady on the left, Lanny Marchand, and her rival, Krista Duchesne, who took out a 28-year-old Canadian national women's marathon record. Sylvia Ruger is the lady in the middle. She was in that first Olympic marathon in Los Angeles in 1984 with the great Greta Weitz, Ingrid Christensen, Joan Benoit. And in January 1985, she ran 2:8:36. And 28 years later, she was on hand as Lanny and Krista. Lanny ran 2:28 flat and Krista 2:28:31. And it was the front page of everything, not just the front page sports, the front page of everything, and evening news from coast to coast. As we saw this morning with Willie and Alana, that all the speakers really, that our athletes, our pro athletes, become heroes, become role models to our children, to the regular runners, and to the broader community. But I think it's important to us to make them relevant, to, as was suggested earlier too, I think by Alana, to get them into the media, to tell some of the wonderful stories that we heard this morning, so that it's not just, oh, who won that race? It was a Kenyan. Oh, maybe it was an Ethiopian. But running at all levels, I think we'd all agree, is aspirational. It's goal-focused. And pro athletes, competitive athletes, lead us forward in this pursuit of excellence that so many of us strive for. I think we all remember that great Nike commercial, "In my mind, I am a Kenyan." And, you know, we're all out there running through the rain and the snow in Canada, not in Kenya. And these things connect us. We have to activate, then, our pro athletes. The massive runners want information and tips, and again, we can draw Alana into this with that's something she's doing brilliantly. We want to know what Lanny Marchand or Krista Duchesne or Reed Coulsett have for breakfast on race day, and what time do they do it? What kind of food, the recipes, as well as training tips. Using elite athletes, pro athletes, for trips and talks to schools, to businesses, and City Hall, as well as running groups. All connect us and connect our events with the broader community. Social media, I think, is also increasingly important in making pro athletes important in the mix, more relevant than ever. This morning, we heard pro athletes speaking directly to us as runners, as race organizers, and now they're doing that every day. You can connect with @Alana Meyer, and if she follows you, you can DM her and get some training tips anytime you like. And she has about 3,400 followers, probably gone up significantly today. But in terms of saying the regular runners aren't interested, Mo Farah, 1.3 million Twitter followers. They want to hear what Mo has to say, what he had for breakfast, Wilson Kipsang, almost 6,000 followers. Paula Radcliffe, 120. You can see even our Canadian champions, Reed Coolset, 5,300, and Lanny, 2,000. Comrades Race, you can follow them this weekend, please. 14,700 followers. So every time you write something on Twitter and Comrades forwards it on, retweets it, 15,000 of their followers see it. Usain Bolt, well, if we say ordinary runners aren't interested in the elites, 3.33 million people. And this is only Twitter, it's not Facebook or Instagram. I think in connecting the pro athletes to the broader community, we also make our sport more relevant to our cities, our communities. And this is something that Mrs. Nyandu spoke about this morning. And here is a good example of the First Lady of Kenya, also followable on Twitter, trained by Douglas Wakihuru this spring to run the London Marathon. And the First Lady's team raised something like 6 or 7 million pounds. And there she is with, of course, none other than Wilson Kipsang and his missus on the Silver Sturgeon boat on the Thames, the London Marathon. And they had such a good time. The First Lady in the middle there invited all our heroes back to lunch when they got home. National heroes, community heroes, role models, and inspirations. Pro athletes, then, I think, are a vital part of our sport today. They make marathons races. They build excitement and buzz that drives participation and spectators. They drive media exposure for us. They build role models and national heroes. They make our sport relevant and help us connect with the broader community that is so important in building our events. In conclusion, I don't believe that it's an either-or option of we should have either high-performance athletes or not. I think we can have recreational runners, we can have charity runners, and we can have high-performance runners. We want everyone, all runners in our sport, under the one big tent. There's room for all. And as I like to hashtag in my tweets, one sport, one love. Thank you very much.
So, hi, my friend. I'm a great speaker in Hungarian, but English first time to be on the podium, speak in English. So, accept my mistakes, please. In spite of my poor level of English, I was asked to speak about our elite runners policy because our standpoint is absolutely different than we heard from Ellen, which was absolutely good, and I don't argue with you. It's okay. I would be happy to see Bekele Kipsang fight in streets of Budapest, because I'm a race director of Budapest Marathon since 20 years, I think 93 and 94, and our race not too big. A few years ago was small, but you mentioned me, it's not a small marathons and half marathons. Our half marathon has, last year we had 7,500 finisher, not entries, and altogether with other distances it was 15,000. The marathon we had 4,000 finisher and organized 30K teams and children race. It was 22,000 participants. It was really big, and all Hungarian media speaks about it. The largest ever Hungarian running event and sports event at a non-professional sports event. First of all, I have to tell you that we absolutely respect all the top athletes and top runners. The talent, performances, times, personality, and so on. Till 2000, we always hesitated to invite or not invite any top athletes. 1 year we invited, 1 year we not. Of course, in that time, every week, I received many phone calls, letters, not emails in that time, faxes. Hey, Arpad, we want to send you my runners. How high is the prize money? That was the first question, of course. Do you need more and more time and better athletes? And that time we realized that our budget is really small. It's not enough to pay for absolutely top athletes. We realized that our money, what we can save from our budget, is enough for 2 hours 12, 2 hours 15. On the half marathon, 63, 64 minutes. The question was, for us, this winning time, 2:15, 63 minutes, does help our goal or not? There was a big debate in the organization committee. Or we have to pay for elite athletes, or better to spend this amount for other important elements of the race. Because Hungary is a very small country, 10 million population, but we won 200 gold medals in Summer Olympic Games. 200. It's a really big. We are the first nation, if you divide the number of gold medals with the population. So the Hungarian press respect only the world-class level. Honestly, 2:15 is not a world-class level. It's very good, but not the world-class. So my friends of Hungarian sport press always mention me, 10 minutes behind the world record, Arpad, sorry. We can't send any cameras for top athletes. We can't write 1 page about your race. Please tell us a good story. So we realized this winning time we can pay don't interest the press. The second aspect was the mass runners. We did that time a short survey. It wasn't representative, but was a very strong survey. And I think, and we thought in that time, that 80–90% of our mass runners don't know the name of the winners, the winning time of the race. Of course, Berlin is, except Berlin, when they run a world record. And they don't interested in about top athletes. So I think is no relate to entries of runners and quality of top athletes. I think the mass runners, when choose the city where they want to run the next marathon, they count the city, how nice it is, the services, friends, and so on, but not who will start on the front line. The third aspect was the sponsors. Since that, I always and frequently ask my sponsors, would you like better time in Budapest? Oh yes. Is it free of charge for us? No. You have to pay, of course. How much? I mentioned the amount. No. Thank you. Always that was the answer. Our sponsors interested in more and more runners. Absolutely more and more runners. So after these 3 aspects, we don't feel any benefit of top athletes between 2:12 or 2:15 and the half marathon 63, 65 minutes. Our conclusion was, in 2001, we never invite any top runners. We focus and spend our budget for local champions. Unfortunately, there is no Hungarian marathon runners under 2:20. So the first 10, 15, 20 minutes, not so convenient for me standing at the finish line, because only a few runners come. But after 3 hours, no different between Berlin and Budapest, Toronto and others. We focus for everyday's heroes. 10,000 finishers and 10,000 real stories. And media likes the special stories. We focus and spend our limited budget for training plans and training groups. Promotion of the marathon spirit is very, very important, I think. We spend our budget for spectators because not too many spectators lined our course. Now it's more than 100,000, but 10 years ago it was a few 10,000. Maybe 200,000 was last year. We have a special program, the music marathon, and so on, like some of you, or mainly of you. We started our charity programs because Hungarians don't like the charity, but now they like. Not $4 million was last year the result. It was only $100,000 US in the second year. I was really happy, but my aim, of course, my goal, $1 million US. And maybe one day we will change our elite athlete policy. But now I think this is the right way for a small event, which has a lot of part of the race to improve. And in the next couple of years, we will spend for the mentioned elements of the race. Thank you very much.
We will soon break into these smaller discussion groups so that you can exchange your own experiences. But first of all, I would like to ask a question, I think, to Alan, but it relates equally to Arpad. The overall performance, the men's race was won in 2:07. The women's race was won in 2:28. And the story... 2:25, I beg your pardon. That's what I meant. Sorry, that's what I meant, the Canadians. So the story, the big story, was Canadian. It wasn't the overall win. And I know that some events, the one I'm thinking of in particular is Stockholm Marathon, they tailor their elite athlete policy, limited elite athlete policy, to the level at which Swedish athletes can perform. So there's always the possibility of a home winner. And that's something that I wonder, how does that, what value, overall value in terms of performance, Arpad is saying that, 2:12, 2:15 is not interesting, but if there was some kind of semi-elite runner from Kenya running 2:19 and a Hungarian breaking 2:20 for the first time this year, would that be more interesting, or, in water polo. But Alan, please, if you wish to comment.
Well, I think, Hugh, to answer the question in part, again, it's the big tent, all of us together. We used the international athletes really to challenge our Canadians. And a dozen years ago, Canadian distance running was like Senor Pozo mentioned the Mexicans this morning, total rubbish. We started, people said you could never have an international marathon in Canada. The fastest time on Canadian soil was 2:09:55 that Waldemar Czapinski from East Germany ran at the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. And people said, you'll never get a sub 2:10 in Canada. And then we got a 2:09:30 in 2007. And then we got a 2:08. And then we got a 2:07. And our local runners, again, our Canadian runners, were running with the international runners, or not far behind them. And so now Reed Coulsett, that I mentioned earlier, Lanny Marchand, who ran the 228 last autumn, who ran in Boston, was 14th in Boston, they all go and train at Lorna Kiplagat's camp in Iten now for 2 or 3 months in the winter and maybe back for a month or so in the summer. And they run with the Kenyans. They exchange training advice. And they believe now, in my mind, not just in my mind I am a Kenyan, but they believe they can get up there. In 2011, Reed Coulsett ran with the 2 East African leaders till 37K, and they ended up again running 2829, and he ran high 210 before dropping off the last few kilometers. So Arpad talked about working with the sponsors to build the charity component, to build the spectators. I believe we can work with the sponsors and with our Canadian athletes and the international athletes to raise the bar. Arpad, you want to?
Sorry to come again, but I hesitated to tell you this story. 2 years ago, in October, 1 week after our marathon, relaxed at home, Monday or Tuesday evening, sitting in our dining room, watching TV. Hungarian national TV sport program. Next news from Toronto Marathon. Jesus Christ. New world record. Very good top athlete policy from Ellen. But what is bad? So, next second, Ellen was seen on the TV in Hungary. And the following day, all the newspaper was absolutely full with Toronto Marathon. Jesus Christ, what happened? And real top athletes finished the race, the 100 years old marathon runners, you know. And the question is he a top athlete or not? In your age category, I think absolutely top athletes. So congratulations, Ellen. Your top athletes policy was absolutely good. There was any news, any words about Bekele and Kipsang, but it was okay.
But again, coming back, surely there's room for everybody. It's not an either or. But I don't have to have the last word. How about the last word from the crowd?
Could we invite Luis up just to make a couple of observations about what we said? I remember bumping into Luis a long, long time ago. I think it was in a lift in an elevator in Japan. And we had a very short discussion, but one of the things he mentioned was this idea of telling a story, a race telling a story. And even London Marathon, who have a lot of money, they do make some attempt to shape the field so there's a story behind it. And I'm sure Luis is a master at this sort of thing.
Thank you, Heath. I believe that every race has a size and could invite a field according to the size of the race and to the budget. I remember many years ago, about 20 years ago, a Korean race director told me that he wanted me to bring him a teethless tiger. Basically, somebody very famous but had no chance to win the race, so it will not cost that much to bring. So you got, and I got him a champion, a world champion from the past, and so he could announce to the press that the world champion was there. Obviously, the world champion was not running as fast and also was not asking for that much money. So there is many ways to put a field together. Elite runners can start from your country. You can sponsor one of your runners to go to Lorna Kiplagat's camp to train, and you have a story behind that, and bring some Kenyans with him to run the race together, to try to get a faster time for the Hungarian runners, for example. But I believe that the press will cover a race with elite runners, much more so than without elite runners. Ilana probably remembers the Gasparilla Resistance Classic in Tampa. It used to be the biggest 15K in the world in February. All the top runners will go there. And then somebody had the bright idea of taking the elite runners out. I live in Tampa, and it was a story, before the race and after the race. And for many years, I live in Tampa and just little coverage the day of the race. Now, they are bringing the elites again because they were losing the sponsors. Does anybody here knows about the Marine Corps Marathon? Anybody? But most people in the world, they have no idea. It's the marathon in Washington, D.C. They have no prize money. They have no elite runners. Nobody knows about them. And it's the capital of the U.S. So you know about the Houston Marathon, and you know about the Cincinnati Marathon, about the Cleveland Marathon, but you don't know about the Marine Corps Marathon or Washington, D.C. Marathon, which is the capital of the U.S. So there you could see some differences there.
I think 1 year, I think everybody knew about the Marine Corps Marathon because they had a megastar running,
Oprah Winfrey. Yeah, you're right.
And I'm sure she didn't demand appearance money.
That's true. That's true.
When we first started thinking about what titles we'd put together for this session, the suggestion was made that, and it was framed a bit differently to what we have as the title now, but it was something like, do AIMS member races have a responsibility to develop the sport by inviting an elite field? And I thought that was not really a question worth asking because I don't feel that race organisers have any responsibility to do that whatsoever. It just depends upon what kind of race they are. Dave, for example, is instrumental in the Great Wall Marathon of China. He's technical director there. I don't think that that race would benefit from having a star athlete like Wilson Kipsang or even somebody at number 100 or 200 in the world rankings. So I don't think a race, a race is in many circumstances is a private company or a charitable institution or something putting on an event for their own purposes, not for the purpose necessarily of improving running standards. Of course, a lot of races do wish to do that, particularly ones who've come from a running club background, or like Berlin, for example, or a national federation background. But we get a lot of inquiries at AIMS from race organisers, members or non-members, who wish to find out about generating an elite field. What do you do? There is a long advisory on the AIMS website that it tells you what is involved. And it's not just a question of money, it's a question of a lot of work and effort that goes into it. Alan's video showing runners arriving in Toronto makes it look like quite a smooth process, but what goes on, and I'm sure Luis knows all the ins and outs of that, is how to get a visa, don't forget your yellow certificate vaccination. There's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't expect when you start to think about inviting elite athletes. So, we're always cautionary on this, and we always do suggest that you think, if that money is available, is it best spent on an elite field? You've heard some persuasive arguments why it may be, but there's always the consideration. A race organisation, above all, has to consider how can they best improve their race, as Arpad was saying. And it could mean an elite field. It could mean that there are other areas of interest that may be more ready for improvement, more return.